This is the London FinTech Podcast, brought to you by your host, Mike Ballerman, bridging the worlds of suits and t-shirts, of finance and technology, bringing you insights, stories, and inspiration from the golden age of opportunity and innovation happening in London right now.
Hi, this is Mike Ballerman, and this is London FinTech Podcast, episode 165, brought to you in association with Smart Pension and theunlistedboard.com. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Tom Butterworth, Head of Early Stage Practice at Silicon Valley Bank, to discuss banking for the high-growth tech sector. This sector has, of course, featured in roughly every podcast for now over 6 years, and banking has cropped up now and then too, and you may have heard of it. But this is the first show in which we have put the two together. SVB is perhaps the commercial bank for high-growth companies and the biggest banker for PE/VC firms. In the UK, they have 4,000 clients, over 1,000 of which are pre-Series A. At the other end of the spectrum, as we heard in LFP165, SVB are also the world leaders in venture debt. We'll hear more about SVB specifically later in the show, but first, let's have a look at the topic of what the banking needs are of a sector which has all sorts of interesting relationships with banks one way and another. Plenty to talk about, so let's get on with the show. Good morning, Tom. Thank you for joining me today.
Morning, Mike. Pleasure to be here.
Now, when we were preparing before, you were looking like a sort of let's just spit it out. I've been at home too long. You were looking rather Neanderthal. You were looking like a caveman, all sort of hunky and hairy and stuff like that. And then I believe that SVB in London were planning to go back to the office. So you sort of made yourself all neat and presentable. Then you went to Greece on holiday. A good plan by the sound of it. But now that we're recording this in the same week that the unevidenced Cromwellian tyrants in Parliament have decided we're all going to be locked up pretty much basically for the next 6 months. You're obviously a high testosterone chap because in a couple of days you've gone back to sort of full beard and that kind of stuff and triple Y chromosomes and things. So how's the journey been for you in the last month or so?
Well, I mean, I was definitely rocking the lockdown look of no haircut and no shave for a period of time. And you're right, we were intending on planning a trial return to the office for just a small group of people in September, but given recent government guidance, we've postponed that. So again, I have very little, to complain about. I have a little shed at the end of my garden where I'm speaking to you now from, so I have a bit of separation. So my commute is now a 10-meter walk from a back door, but I don't have my 2 young kids kind of nipping around my feet, which I know a lot of other people have had to deal with. While I was away, I was kind of thinking actually, it's been a long time since I've been in central London. I think I've been in once since March. I mean, also another interesting thing is that I can't remember the last time I wore trousers. I've been in shorts since March as well.
In which case, I hope you're not going to stand up then, because I can see you sort of waist up.
I can show you wearing shorts, but yes, that's been one of the benefits of the working situation is just wearing shorts all the time. Yeah, but I was kind of thinking it would be nice to go, get back into town a little bit and, pop into the office, if it was possible to do so. But yeah, that's been delayed for the foreseeable, obviously, given the announcement early this week.
Yes, and talking of not wearing shorts, of course, there's the famous Warren Buffett comment about when the tide goes out, who's not wearing shorts. And also, I was sent a sort of rather interesting video of a Spanish protest today about masks. In Spain, it's apparently, €200 or something fine automatically or something if you're not wearing a mask. So there were plenty of cyclists of the ladies and gentlemen's varieties cycling through, I think maybe Madrid, wearing just a mask and nothing else, which seemed to be, talking of not wearing shorts, a rather potentially uncomfortable thing for the gentlemen. So yes, not wearing shorts is sort of very much on the mind at the moment. And in terms of this sort of the craziness, I think that firms have actually worked really well in terms of adapting very rapidly to suddenly everybody from working from home. And then within firms, plenty of people, as you say, have been busy working on plans to come back to the office and all that kind of jazz, encouraged by the government, I should say. and only to be told a sort of couple of weeks later, oh no, forget it. So it's really tricky planning. And as we've touched on before on the podcast, in terms of people I speak to, companies are doing very well working from home. But after a time, it gets harder to do new initiatives and harder to do business development, these stuff that you could do by just walking around the floor in the office instead of 10 minutes. You've got to set up hundreds of Zooms. So I think that the second 6 months will start showing the sort of more strategic challenges for businesses, because businesses have been tactically coping very well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think, you know what, again, I'm in a position of privilege like a lot of my colleagues are, but there is a mental health aspect here as well, right? Where, you know, if you're not fortunate enough to have a shed at the end of your garden and you're in a flat share and, you know, you don't have any outdoor space, it's pretty challenging. And I think there's a period of time where people could deal with it, but now obviously it's, you know, so for sure there's people that are struggling with this, and I think that all companies need to take, you know, a good look at how they support those employees from a mental health aspect, because it's, you know, I'm feeling it and I feel okay, so I can imagine some people are really struggling.
Yes, that's a very important point, and thank you for raising it. You know, it needs to be thought about by any listeners and their firms at the moment. Mental health is very, very bad. And the other thing that we've seen is not just mental health, actually, but is physical health. So we have various friends who have got various physical conditions that have cropped up. And in the usual way, if they manage to get into hospitals, which isn't always easy these days, they go for test after test after test, all of which show nothing. You know, we have several people that say, oh, we had this test and this test. Oh, it didn't show anything. And, you know, my view on that is it's psychosomatic. It's that if you put people under stress, you know, and for many people living on their own, it's solitary confinement, which is the biggest punishment in prisons, that even if you're sort of, you manage to stay together emotionally and mentally without despairing too much, which is a struggle for us all at times, you can end up with physical health problems. So yes, that's an issue. I'm not quite sure how companies can address it, but to the extent they've got something available, so much the better. So it's very challenging times. And going back to the young folks, my daughter, as I mentioned before, has sort of found her way into the tech world, and every day she works in her flat, in her bedroom, on the laptop. So you get out of bed, you crawl, looking even more Neanderthal-like. I'm sure I've seen her in this state than you are, Tom, and just, you know, hunch over your laptop. And, you know, in her case, I don't think I'm telling tales out of school. It's an important lesson for other people. Hunched over a laptop, she's developed back problems. Because if you sit over a laptop 10 hours a day, if you don't walk anywhere, even a tiny little apartment in London, shared flat, you don't walk anywhere, then it does your back in. So again, just as a sort of public broadcast announcement, do look at your posture, how you're sitting. I use a computer, Bridget uses a laptop, and for quite some time, she's had a riser, so the laptop screen is actually at eye level, and she loses a Bluetooth keyboard. So if anybody's in this for the long run, then please do think of your posture and all that kind of stuff, because you know what it's like with bad backs. Once you've got a bad back, it's one thing to acquire it, it's another thing to shake it off. So yes, be careful, everybody, and firms, do what you can to help people. So moving on from this crazy, crazy world of 2020, it wasn't always 2020. Hopefully it won't always be 2020, literally and metaphorically speaking. So how did you get, I was about to say here, but let's miss out the 2020. How did you get to December 2019 in your career? And what are you looking forward to from January 2021? Let's delete 2020 from the archives.
I think like a lot of people with their careers, and I was very fortunate that this happened, but I stumbled into banking. I had no aspirations to be, you know, a banker. It was a way for me to move to London and, you know, try and probably continue as much of the university lifestyle as I possibly could do. But actually I always did find finance very interesting from, you know, a reasonably young age. So I guess maybe there's somewhere sort of subliminally it was at the back of my mind. I joined a large bank and was working with general businesses, so no specialization, no tech focus whatsoever. And then around sort of 2007, I guess, I just started, and it was probably just kind of when the tech scene was starting to take off in London. I was just bumping into more entrepreneurs. Because, you know, at the time I was quite a young guy for the role, and I was dealing with, you know, these finance directors who were, you know, much more advanced in their years than me, and, you know, they were coming to me to talk about financing options and things like that, and it was always maybe a slightly uneven relationship. And I met these entrepreneurs, and it was like age, you know, just doesn't matter. Like, it was all just about, you know, let's move fast. Like, how do we build great relationships? How do we move forward? They didn't really care how old you are, what gender you were, anything like that. It was like, I want to work with the best people. And I said to my manager at the bank at the time, look, I really actually want to focus on this. I know that's not my job, but I really want to focus on it. And their response was, I don't really care, as long as you hit your targets, you can do it whichever way you want. So I began working with these entrepreneurs, and then very quickly, it was like someone flicked a switch. I went from being maybe a little bit apathetic about my career in banking to actually like, this is incredible. I get to spend time with these entrepreneurs doing incredible things, and that's all I want to do. I just focused 100% on it, and it just happened to coincide with the rise of the sector in London. And then about 7 years ago, just over 7 years ago actually, Silicon Valley Bank approached me and said, would you like to come and join us? We hear your name a few times from entrepreneurs. So I joined the bank when it was a relatively small team in an office in Loughborough, and now we're over 300 people. So it's been a really exciting journey to where I am today, and just feel very fortunate to have, through luck, good judgment, whatever it is, stumble across this incredible sector where you get to spend time with these incredible people. It's, I feel very, very, very lucky.
Yes, it's like one of those, long distance paragliding or something like that. You kind of, over the long term, one kind of floats around in the career, kind of enjoying it, liking the people you're working with, and doing work as well, and all that kind of stuff. But then every now and then, the sort of heat comes, and you suddenly whoosh up sort of several thousand feet in the atmosphere. It happens to most people, and you really find yourself in some sort of kind of state of career flow, going places, and it's all very energizing and exciting. And before you know it, you're somewhere that you weren't a long time ago doing something different. So we'll wrap up at the end with what kind of things that you and Silicon Valley Bank do for your clients. But just let's start off with a super big picture for the main course, which I said is the overlap of banking and the tech sector in terms of what techs need banks for in terms of their business. Let's forget the sort of, flogging them fintechy tech products and cooperating or competing. We're not talking about that angle. We're talking about really that if you're a startup, you and I have an idea tomorrow in the pub, it better get out by 10 p.m. We have an idea in the pub. We leave sober for the first time in our lives. We don't immediately need any banking things at the moment because we need to scratch our head a little bit. But just to give us a condensed view of the journey, you and I have started a new code tomorrow, and of course we're going to be massively successful, and in 10 years' time we list on the stock exchange. What kind of banking products per se does a new co, startup, scale-up, growth co, pre-IPO listed company need in general?
Yeah, there's the aspirational element here. So, if your route is that you just want to build a company, a lifestyle type business, which is going to do very well, and that's great, and that could turn into something, your needs are going to be pretty simple, and they're unlikely to change. The same way that from a personal banking perspective, it's very rare you actually need to speak to a bank. You do it all online. You may speak to them very occasionally, but it's a pretty simplistic relationship. I think that the other and the journey that you described of, if you want to go on that journey, which is incredibly difficult, let's not forget, if you look at the statistics, you're probably, it's probably easier to be a Premier League footballer than it is to be an incredibly successful entrepreneur. It is one of the hardest things you could ever do, which is why, both you and I expect in all of these individuals. But if you want to go on that journey, I think increasingly we're seeing this through podcasts and people hearing about it. I won't mention any of your competitors.
I don't think there are any competitors. There's no one quite like me. In the same way there aren't any competitors to the Gavroche or something like that in London. There are other restaurants are available.
Exactly, Mike. Quite right. So if you want to go on that journey, it's important to set up your business for success as early as you possibly can. Now, there's going to be a stage when, you've got out of the pub and you want to, register the company, and it's going to take a bit of time to get up and running. And again, your needs at that stage are quite simplistic, and you probably need to validate the idea. But as soon as you validated it and actually know that you're on that path, you probably want to get things set up pretty early around the infrastructure and surround yourself with the best possible people. Using an accountancy example, using a guy who's doing accountancy in his bedroom in my hometown of Bolton, he might be okay to start off with, but very quickly you're going to need to professionalize and get someone probably better than that individual to be your accountant. The same goes for your lawyers, same goes for your accountant. So from a banking perspective, it depends what you need and what you want, but anyone who's in the innovation space, you really want a bank that's going to be there with you from the start of that journey to the end. Switching banks is incredibly painful, incredibly time consuming, and you want people that can, provide support. And banking is a commodity, right? Like a current account with any bank doesn't really do anything any different. You might have, slightly different online interface, but in general, like banking, the day-to-day element is highly commoditized. So then the differentiation is really around the service side. And I know we're probably going to talk about, relationship management. It's around the products that bank can offer. So are they generic products which are available to every single sector, or are they actually specialist and highly focused on the area that you're operating in? And then do you have people that have actually got experience of working with your type of business and working with your type of business from where you are today, but also where you want to be in the future? Because if you're with a bank that is going to be able to support you for, the next 12 months, is that where you want to be? Or do you want to be with a bank that can be there from very early stage all the way through to large private and public? And that's a question for the entrepreneur, and working out, what is going to be right for them. And then as you get more larger, more complex, there's going to be more products and services and things that you'll need, which are going to get more and more specialist as you go along. So if you're looking at, a tech company, and venture debt, if you're Series A, Series B, Series C, a traditional high street bank is not going to be able to offer you that product.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll come back onto the products in a minute. So I like your point that early on in the journey, and our NewCo were forming tomorrow to help the world appreciate these great entrepreneurs even more, a kind of entrepreneurial fan club. We'll have a magazine so that teenage boys and girls can stick sort of the posters on their bedroom wall with pictures of great entrepreneurs and all that kind of jazz. One of the first things we need to do, long before we're a FTSE, is surround ourselves by professional services advisors, which in this context we can include, for a change, banks. As you say, you need good accountants, you need good lawyers. I mean, I remember when I had my sort of fintech in sort of 98 or so, long before they existed. At some point I was doing deals with the likes of Barings and Flemings, and it was little old me. And I needed, proper industry grade commercial IP protection. So I had to find a very good commercial IP lawyer who was industry standard to help me. So it's not always a question of scale. It's not a question that, once you get to 100 people, once you get to 200 people. No, I found this myself. I was one person at the time, had some associates, but I was one person at the time, and I needed the top of the shop stuff. So I like that point. And also I remember actually talking about 1998. Going back to how things have changed in the startup world, there wasn't really a startup world in 1990s, other than hedge funds left and did stuff, that it was a hell of a job actually opening any bank account. You'd just go around on your own saying, I want a business bank account, and they'd sort of literally peer down their noses at you. Who on earth would want that kind of thing? So, got the first bit, and then maybe it will help if you just talk a little bit about the spectrum of products. So as you say, current account, yes, I've got that. Service, we'll talk more about relationship banking and that, and then kind of top of the shoppy, sexy stuff like venture debt. But in terms of how hard can it be, quotes, surely it's easy just to be a bank because you give somebody a current account and then you lend me money or you don't. Isn't it that easy? Isn't your job simple, Tom?
Well, that's the commoditized element, Mike, right? Like a current account is a current account anywhere, and it's kind of what you layer in addition to that. And there's if you look at the main reason why, people would choose to work with, Silicon Valley Bank, the bank account probably isn't the main part of that, which I know sounds bizarre, but I think it's the case. And it really is that, we talk a lot about value add and increasing our clients' chance of success. Like, and what does that mean? A lot of people say that kind of stuff. But, for us, like, because we're also the biggest banker of VCs, we have an amazing network where we bank about 50% of all venture-backed businesses in the US, for example. So we've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs over a lot of years. So if you're an early stage company and you're looking for some support, some advice, someone who's worked in your sector before, if you're looking for a NED, if you're looking for connections to investors, even if you're looking for, there's actually a bit of a plug, there's a video on our website that we did with a company called Zephyr, where this is a founder who, he'd come out of industry, knew very little about VC, didn't know how to navigate the landscape at all, and, came to us and we helped him in terms of saying, well, look, let's review your deck. Let's look at, the types of investors that would be interested in your sector. And, we made some introductions for him, and it ended up with him raising his round. And so that's the real reason why people choose to work with Silicon Valley Bank is not the bank account. It's the additional things they get outside of that, which we don't actually, there's no fee for that. We're not getting a success fee from anybody. The reward for SVB comes, A, because it's fun and it's a nice thing to do, but also if we help that company grow, then as it gets, to later stage, there are more products and services. There is, debt opportunities for us, which is where we actually generate, the revenue side from. But there's one of our colleagues who always spoke about, you should give before you get. by providing that value add even to early stage companies, where you're right, a lot of other institutions look at companies based on how much revenue have you got, how profitable are you. We will lend to you if you are 2.5 times EBITDA to debt servicing, and that's our model, and we don't go outside of that. We're looking at these companies on potential. So even if they are pre-revenue, they've raised some money, we still want to be helpful to them and invest time in that company based on the fact that if they're successful, the reward comes for us later down the track. But that is our model, and that's why it's a pleasure and it's fun, and I love going to work because I get to spend time with these entrepreneurs, and we get to do things like provide introductions and provide support to them. And we're not talking about products and services all the time, because realistically, if you're a pre-revenue early stage company, the product set that you need is very simplistic. You probably want a current account. You might want a deposit account where, it's very hard at the moment to get any interest anywhere. Bank of England's talking about negative interest rates. You may probably want some, commercial card program for expenses to extend that working capital period with those. So yeah, it's a pretty simplistic product set for an early stage company, but then it's what's layered on top of that, which is actually interesting for them.
So for the later stage company then, who is substantial, and as we know these days, these tech companies, the better ones, bigger ones, are by no means small. I mean, some of them have raised hundreds of millions of capital. They're substantial businesses by anybody's reckoning. Are there a sophisticated range of products you're selling there, or is it simply that you've got debt, you lend money? I mean, you're a bank, that's what banks do, and that the money comes from having a debt portfolio. I mean, venture debt to that extent would just be a type of debt where you've got, as it were, a different sort of credit risk assessment, as you say, as opposed to, your EBITDA is so-and-so, and EBITs and all these things.
I think it's more specialization, right? And it's not just venture debt. There's a whole range of, working capital, so receivables, lines, etc. So for example, we have a line of credit for retail, e-com type businesses where, based on, their various metrics, we can look at, providing a facility purely for marketing. So, you can get quite bespoke on the facilities if you're a specialist and you operate in a vertical. And then, when you get to much, bigger companies, the kind of large corporates, then it is a bit more commoditized. But that's where, again, the value comes in, the fact that we work with lots of other companies, which could be, part of M&A activity. We're obviously a US headquartered bank, so we have this amazing bridge to the US where we can help companies expand to the US very, very quickly, easily and efficiently. And also we then have that US network. And also, because we've been doing this since the early 80s, we have, some amazing data. So if there's a company which is, operating in the UK, B2B SaaS for, whatever it is, we would be able to say, here's, we work with these companies in the US, like, would you want to speak to them, share advice, share stories, whatever it is. So it's that experience that you wrap around it. But for sure, there are the products, particularly as you get post Series A, can get definitely more specialist for a specialist bank like ourselves versus, maybe a generic high street bank, for example.
I see. That's interesting. Well, I think one of the reasons for asking is that back in the old world, when one would sort of go to things and meet people at random and just have random chats, which is one of the nice things. I like serendipity and randomness, rather than everything is planned via emails coming in and is sort of kind of linear. I like the non-linear stuff. I rather miss it. I'd met, of course, especially in the early days when I did more running around London, I've met people from SVP and important people at the time, and I've heard a lot about SVP, etc., etc. And I always came away with the sort of vague impression, I'm vague on everything, so this is not a particular thing about SVP, that SVP have been very successful, and they're very nice and they're very helpful. All of which is wonderful. They're very sort of nice attributes. But I always sort of wondered where SVP, who are presumably not a charity, actually managed to get the money from. But hearing you speak there, it sounds to me that in different terms, would it be true to say that you're a bank, you're very focused on a particular sector which you know extremely well, therefore you have a commercial advantage in providing a whole range of banking products to this area because you're a specialist in it, and to a certain extent going back to specialisms, a lot of what you say reminds me of the old-fashioned merchant banks. I mean, strip off the investment management arm, then a lot of what you're talking about is simply what merchant banks would have been doing in the 80s, which is a little bit of corporate finance advisory, which was never really charged for back in the day, some commercial lending, particular understanding of certain sectors, certain banks focused on, I don't know, trade finance or something like that. So we'll come on to the 21st century stuff in a second, but to an extent, and the old-fashioned here I use in a very positive sense, not in a negative sense, to an extent you're an old-school bank, one that knew its customers very well, knew its vertical very well, and therefore could service it very well. And if you can do that as a business, it doesn't matter whether you're a bank or a tech startup, you're going to make money.
Yeah, maybe our marketing team should speak to you, Mike, because I think you put that really well.
We're a really old-fashioned bank.
No, but I think that is that's kind of how we think about it as well, that, it's providing, genuine relationship management for high growth businesses. And yet, of course, like we're NASDAQ listed, we're answerable to shareholders. We have to make a profit and generate large amounts of revenue. The fortunate thing for us is that we have this, groundswell of, incredible companies. And if you start working with them from early on, the model is that we start working with them from early. If they go and become a huge IPO success in the US, they're going to need more products and services as they expand. They're going to want to move it internationally. They're going to do more foreign exchange, all those benefits we get by proxy by working with these incredible companies. So yeah, of course we need to generate the revenue and everything else. But for us, the reason why companies choose to work with us is as you described, is the relationship element and the understanding, because we don't do anything else. If you look at a lot of the big banks, they're doing everything from investment banking to, you can buy holiday insurance from them. Don't forget, these are incredible businesses. The big banks make an awful lot of money, and they're very complex organizations and they do some incredible things for sure. But it's very hard for them to dedicate the resource to specialize in just one vertical, because they're kind of they're an inch deep and a mile wide. They do everything and that's their business model, which is a great business model. Our business model is the flip of that we're an inch wide and a mile deep. And whenever we've gone outside of our model, and we have done it on occasion historically, it hasn't really worked out for us. So we know, I think you mentioned Warren Buffett earlier, he's got that quote of your spots and you should stick around them. That's what we do. We know our spots, we stick around them, and we focus 100% on them, and we don't deviate from it.
Oh, excellent. Well, finally, I after many years, have some understanding of SBB. Okay, so that's very clear. And I understand both the relationship banking aspect and the focused aspect, and then the commercial aspect in terms of having a competitive advantage in terms of providing products to a sector that you know intimately well, and loyal clients. I mentioned in the intro, I think that you've got 1,000 pre-Series A. You ain't going to make mega bucks from pre-Series A companies, but equally, and I've seen lawyers try this, and most of them failed actually, because they're under more commercial pressure to sort of generate revenue per hour kind of stuff, which is that unless you've got a big base at the bottom of your pyramid, you're not going to get the FTSEs at the top. You can't sort of pick winners out of startups, not at all easily. Anyway, so is there anything else you want to say about relationship banking for the innovation age? And then maybe a little bit about how you see the future going, without mentioning the COVID-19 word.
Yeah, so I think, relationship manager, relationship banking is, if you spoke to my grandparents, they'd think of, Captain Mannering, the bank manager who knew every single person in the town, and he would make the decisions, as to whether or not to lend you a mortgage. Bob's a good egg, of course you can have a mortgage, not a problem. Here's your mortgage. If you speak to the other, the kind of younger generation, they have no concept of that at all. The idea of speaking to a bank is completely foreign, and their interface is their mobile phone. And like I said, for most people that's fine. Like, you don't need any more than that. I can't remember the last time I spoke to my bank. I think what you do need, there's kind of a spectrum of relationship management, right? And there's the part of it that's got maybe given the term perhaps a bad name, where it is, someone who's there and is part of a bank to sell you as many products or services as possible, whether you need them or not. And, there's plenty of examples of, PPI, etc., where that's what's come to fruition. I think that at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the banker who has an in-depth knowledge of your sector. And, private banking, certain private banks have people who are focused on musicians, people who are focused on actors, even people who are focused on lottery winners. Their needs are completely different, so they understand that. And even at some of the banks where they have a TMT practice, so technology, media, telecoms is typically the term that's used. to look after a fintech company and a health tech company, they have completely different needs. So I think the more specialist you go, kind of the better it is for the client, and that's the route that we've gone. So we've gone the subsector route. But I also think it's that trusted advisor role. So the relationship manager isn't just there to sell you products and services, but they're not the expert in everything. They're the orchestra conductor for the bank for you. So if you need help with foreign exchange, we'll bring in the expert. If you want help with credit, they can bring in a credit expert. That's really the role of a relationship manager. And some of these last quite a long time, and I've got relationships and with clients who I no longer have any commercial relationship with whatsoever from a decade ago, and I'm still in touch with them on a regular basis. So it is that you do build a genuine connection with these people. So that's what relationship banking is. I think in the future you will see more of both. So I mean, you'll see more of the interface and digitization, but I also think you will see people start to value the analog element of a relationship as well, because if you get a more complex need or there's an issue, having someone on point to speak to is much better than trying to speak to a chatbot.
Absolutely. So bifurcation is the way. The middle ground is kind of disappearing, and as you say, you need digitized products. But also, as any founder of a business, once it's sort of medium sized and growing, realizes your challenges are in a sense more abstract. On day one, you want a lawyer, you want a bank account, you want all these basic building blocks, you want these little Lego building blocks. But when we're halfway through our 10-year journey to the FTSE, after 5 years, our needs are more sophisticated, and as I say, more abstract. Which comes down to of where a good board can help you. But to the extent that you're talking, you sound a lot like what founders and businesses need anyway, which is kind of, whether they're formal or informal, advisory directors, people they can pick up the phone and say, hey Tom, I've got a bit of a problem here. I'm looking at expanding into Romania. I really got to, do you happen to know anybody? He says, oh yeah, I do know, or I don't, or I might know somebody who does know. And all that jazz becomes more and more invaluable as time goes on. Anyway, before we wrap up the show, I'd like to thank all the listeners out there. Make sure you're looking after your posture at your desks and laptops especially, and also somehow trying to keep yourself half sane and half fit. And I'd like to thank my brand partners for the podcast, Smart Pension, who are fast, secure and free. Check out the UK workplace pensions at autoenrollment.co.uk, theunlistedboard.com, resources to help you start making your board an engine of growth today. So we've mentioned SVB once or twice. Hopefully by now, the average listener with a tech company under their belt will be reaching for their smartphones, their laptops, their PCs, and be trying to contact you guys immediately, because you sound like one of these firms where you may or may not be the right person for a given random company in the world, but you're definitely in such a prime position in a major sector that people should check you out and decide whether, oh yes, these are the ones for us, or they aren't ones for us. It would be sort of slightly remiss not to know about a bank. Just talking about the UK, which we've been focusing on, covers 4,000 clients in the high growth sector. Are there any other shout outs you want to give, Tom, about SVB in the UK or indeed worldwide? I mean, roughly how many offices do you have, for example, in how many countries?
I know you have a global audience, Mike, so it'd be remiss of me not to mention the kind of footprint that we have. So yeah, we have US, Canada, UK, Ireland, Denmark, Germany, Israel, and China. We're going to be expanding for sure. In terms of the day-to-day banking, it's the US and UK. The rest of those offices are just lending-only businesses. We're also not the right bank for every company, even in this space. So if you're building an app in your spare time and you've got, some of your savings build up and you literally just need somewhere to put that money, we're probably not the right bank for you, because there's that value add, can we add that value? But once you get to the stage where it is a bit more complex, you have raised a bit of money, then we're absolutely I believe the right bank to work with you. So yeah, if you're, in the UK or US and you want to talk about banking, please, go to our website. You can find all the details on there, but we love to speak to as many entrepreneurs as possible, and even ones where it's not the right time now, we're still happy to find out about what their businesses are doing and talk about how we could be helpful now or in the future. Great.
Okay, that's been very helpful. Time's gone very fast. And just thinking again from the NewCo to FTSE journey perspective, when you have an idea on your own or with a mate and you're putting things together, you need a few very basic building blocks right away. You need accountants and banks and lawyers and all that jazz. But in terms of the many entrepreneurs I've spoken to over the journey, as time goes by, I mean, one of the unstated things is that over time, as time goes by and you become more successful, you can upgrade the quality of your your staff, I've spoken to many people. They said, well, actually, the reason we got here is my staff were great, but now actually I've got more money. I can afford one of the best CMOs in London as opposed to a fantastic CMO. Then in the same way, either you need to start with sort of cheap and cheerful, your local branch manager in Bolton or whatever, wherever you're starting your firm, and then upgrade over time to city lawyers, as I had to in a commercial situation, rather than just using a local lawyer who would have been out of his depth. Or, as you say, if you're lucky, then many people start with law firms that you and I would know in London right from the beginning, who can serve them through the whole journey, and the same with banking. And as you say, it depends on what kind of subsector you're in the business, but all the businesses that I've seen that are sort of growing very big, for example, valuation of $1 billion and above, they end up with very sophisticated needs. I sometimes use the word small co myself. I wish there was a better word than small co or unlisted company, as I use on my book, but there isn't really a good phrase. SME can be very vague. I mean, some of those can be listed and some unlisted, but these are really very big businesses with very sophisticated needs. So yes, why not check out a bank that's got a hell of a lot of experience in your sector and maybe can help you in many intangible ways above and beyond banking products and services. So thank you very much for that, Tom. I wish SVB every success in the future, and I hope that you and many, many others get back to the office sooner than we're all fearing at the moment. I know London needs it. I think the stat I saw the other week was that it was only 14% occupancy of offices in London or something crazy, and there are many, many businesses in London, many, many people in London making their livelihood from people going back to the office. So I wish we every success in the future.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, let's when we can, it would be great to meet up for a coffee or a beer or something for sure.
Exactly, and we'll definitely eat a biscuit with that to celebrate, or a packet of crisps. No expense spared. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for listening. If you have any challenges or needs with your unlisted company board, get in touch with me at mike@londonfintechpodcast.com.
We could sit in a bender all day, watching the firelight dance, watching the firelight dance. We could walk in the mountains before dawn, watching a happy moonrise, watching a happy moonrise. Come away from the city, with the tarmac so dead and the people so sad. Come away from the city, with the faces so grey, with the pain of the everyday. We are wild like the mountains and the trees. Can you see what I mean? Can you see what I mean? We fit in between the earth and the sky. Kiss the city goodbye, wave the city goodbye, wave the city goodbye. The city goodbye. Watch the firelight dance with me. 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 Watch the firelight.